So, of course, ahead of the All-Ireland football final this coming Saturday between Dublin and Mayo, what I thought I would do was have a look at the top 5 games between Dublin and Mayo down the years, of course. Now, obviously, this is my opinion, this is my top 5, but if you do feel free, if you do think there's other games that should be included on this list, then do feel free to let me know down in the comments below. Second thing worth pointing out is there are no games from the 80s or 50s in this list, and obviously, I wasn't alive back then, and to be honest, I don't want to, scavenge the, whole depths of the internet just to try and find out what actually happened back in those games. However, if you do feel that one of those games should have been on this list, do feel free to let me know down in the comments below. And without further ado, I suppose let's get straight into it, and we'll kick off with number 5, and I've gone with Dublin and Mayo. Well, obviously, Dublin and Mayo. Dublin 3-14, Mayo 1-10, the 2019 All-Ireland semi-final. Now, if you're a Mayo fan, you could say this shouldn't be on the list, but if you're a Dublin fan, you could say it should be higher on the list. In the end, I've put it at number 5. I think this was the best individual performance from either team when they've played each other down the years. I think Dublin were outstanding in the second half against Mayo. And, there's been numerous times when Dublin and Mayo have played each other down the years where one team has had the opportunity to put the other team to bed. Like, there's been times where Dublin have been absolutely dreadful and Mayo have had the chance to finish Dublin off, and vice versa. Dublin probably should have killed Mayo off on numerous occasions in the multiple All-Ireland finals and semi-finals they met. But in the semi-final, this is when it happened, and it happened in their most recent championship meeting of last year, of course. And look, listen, the first half was certainly interesting. From a Mayo point of view, it was going all according to plan. James Horan's men had a specific game plan to sit deep and really try and nullify Dublin in attack, and Dublin couldn't get going. Mayo kept turning Dublin over. Dublin's forwards weren't getting much of the ball, the likes of Conor O'Callaghan, the likes of Paul Mannion, and Mayo actually led 8-6 at half time. But really where the brilliance from Dublin actually came into it was in the second half, of course, where Dublin scored 2-6 without reply. Conor O'Callaghan scoring 2 goals. Dublin pressed up high on Mayo's kickouts, and Mayo just simply did not have an answer. David Clark was struggling with his kickouts. They couldn't settle into the second half, and before we knew it, really, this game was all but over. Dublin scored 2-6 without reply. Lee Keegan did respond with a goal of his own, but Dublin were very much in control at that point. Fenton got another goal, and all they had to do was manage the game and make sure that Mayo didn't come back into it. And in the end, Dublin ran out comfortable 10-point winners, and that was number 5 on the list between Dublin and Mayo. And in at number 4, we have the Hillgate saga between Mayo and Dublin in 2006. Now, I did talk about this in a previous video I made a couple of months ago, and I looked through some of the most embarrassing defeats from Dublin down the years, and this was, I think it was number 5 on the list back then, in my opinion anyway. And this was a very disappointing defeat from Dublin on the day. And look, listen, you could say that maybe in terms of quality, this game maybe shouldn't be on the list, but I do think the Hillgate saga and everything that went with it just propels this onto this list. And I think it was such an eventful game that you can't leave it out, in my opinion. And look, listen, obviously most people probably know the Hillgate saga already, but I will describe it for people who do not know what happened. So basically what happened was Mayo came out into Croke Park first. Obviously, normally what happens is Dublin train and they do their warm-up, their stretches, their conditioning, everything in front of Hill 16. And they always train in front of the Hill 16 end, because obviously Hill 16 is predominantly full of Dublin supporters, so they're able to cheer their team on. It just works out perfectly for Dublin most of the time. But what Mayo decided to do was get out early and train in front of Hill 16 to really try and rile up the fans, rile up the Dublin team, get under their skin, bit of a psychological battle, and it worked. It definitely worked. Dublin didn't score their first point until the 16th minute of the game, and didn't settle in the game at all really in the first half, and took a long time to get going. I look back at this Dublin team in that era in particular, and it was kind of mad because Dublin back then were almost prima donnas in many ways. They celebrated after every goal. There was this real expectation that Dublin were the best team in the country, when realistically we weren't at that point. We were probably, nowhere near it really. I think Kerry, Tyrone were a good bit ahead of us, and even Mayo were able to turn us over on this particular day. And it was a mad game. It was a mad situation. It was also my first game on Hill 16 as an 11-year-old, which was, what a game to choose to be on Hill 16 for the first time. And look, listen, Conal Keeney and Jason Sherlock both got Dublin on track. They both got goals, and Dublin were in control with 25 minutes to go. So after the very poor start, they were able to settle down, and they had a 7-point lead with 25 minutes to go. But Mayo, to be fair to them, to give them the credit that they deserve, they came back. Young Andy Moran at the time got a goal in front of Hill 16 on the 50th minute. Kieran McDonald, Conor Mortimer were all outstanding, and it was a very rip-roaring game without doubt. Like, teams were turning each other over. It was very, very tense and very close at the end. You had Mark Vaughan, who had that chance. He hit the post right in the closing stages. I remember that well, of course, being at the game. And yeah, Mayo got the win. And I suppose it's the only victory from Mayo on this list, but it was one that certainly does live long in the memory of both Mayo and Dublin supporters. And in at number 3, we have the Dublin and Mayo 2015 drawn game in the semi-final. Now, it is kind of surprising when I was going back, and I was looking at a lot of different Dublin and Mayo games to try and pick out this list, and I found that there was actually a lot of very bad games. There was a lot of poor games, and don't get me wrong, like, I remember from watching the games that a lot of them were quite poor, but you forgot how poor some of them actually quite were. And that's why it might be surprising that we haven't even come to any of the All-Ireland finals yet. We've just been discussing semi-finals, and this was another one, the 2015 drawn game. Dublin did start the better. Paul Flynn was dragged down on the 4th minute, and Dublin dispatched of the penalty, which really did set the tone quite early on. And Mayo were definitely slow out of blocks here, and this is when I go back to saying that, you know, there were opportunities for either one of these two counties to basically finish the other county off, and Dublin certainly had an opportunity to really kill Mayo in the opening first half of this game. Like, they led 1-3 to 1 point in the opening 13 minutes, and Mayo just couldn't seem to get into the game. Cillian O'Connor was struggling in some ways. He was winning a lot of frees, but he wasn't able to get any points from play. Dublin kept turning Mayo over higher up the pitch, specifically in Mayo's forward line. The only difference was, though, that Mayo were able to stay in this game through getting frees. Dublin kept giving away silly frees, and that was really what kept Mayo in the game. And at half-time, it was 1-7 as Dublin had a 3-point lead. Going into the second half, Kilkenny was brilliant, and Kevin McManaman, who certainly pops up quite a lot throughout this list, he made a big difference coming on at half-time. Got himself a point, got himself a goal as well. And, I mean, it was an interesting game. Keane O'Sullivan could have been black-carded at one stage. Michael Darragh Macaulay did get a black card, and it was really just edging back and forth. And Dublin, in the end, had a lead. They had a 6-point lead with 7 minutes to go after McManaman's goal, and it looked like Dublin were going to win this one quite comfortably. And, like, I remember watching this game, obviously, live at the time, and obviously having gone back and watched the highlights. Dublin just completely capitulated in the final 10 minutes, which was very surprising, without doubt, because normally Dublin, very assured, they're able to see the game out, they slow the game down, they keep possession, and they don't allow the other team to come back into it. A bit like, you know, 2019 when Dublin had that big lead over Mayo, and they were comfortable and they were able to see the game out, and Mayo were never able to get back into it. But in this game, Mayo came back into it, and Dublin were on the ropes. Dublin were absolutely on the ropes, and there was a Mayo penalty, so there was a foul on Colin Boyle. Cillian O'Connor dispatched the penalty, and Mayo were very much back into it. Andy Moran was doing fantastic. He hit a couple of points. Dermot Connolly was then sent off. Stephen Cluxton missed the free that he'd normally score. Dublin were absolutely rattled. They were on the ropes, and the chance was there for Mayo. There was a couple of minutes when Mayo drew level, and going into injury time, I remember thinking at the time, Mayo have this opportunity now to beat Dublin, but they didn't even get a scoring chance. Dublin just managed to get the blocks in the final few minutes, and both teams cancelled each other out, and it did go to a replay in the end. And, you know, we will speak about that replay in a couple of minutes, but without doubt, this was a classic game. The way Mayo fought back in this game was outstanding. They showed a tremendous amount of heart and desire, and Dublin were very much on the ropes. And in a game where it looked like Dublin were going to win it quite comfortably, Mayo just came rip-roaring back, and in the end forced the replay. And then we have the 2017 final. Dublin 1-17, Mayo 1-16. And this was an interesting final. This was the most recent final between Dublin and Mayo. Obviously, they met each other again in 2019 in the semi-final. But 2016 and 2017, those two finals, including the replay in 2016 as well, they were very strange games. They were very odd. They were very bizarre. I don't think either team really ever played to their full potential in both games. And I think the game was there to be grabbed by the scruff of the neck on multiple occasions, and in the end it was Dublin that happened to do it on this occasion in 2017, I suppose, just like in 2016 in the replay as well. And it was quite mad looking back at this game, because I did expect, you know, when I'd gone back and watched a lot of the games, I did anticipate that this would be number one. And I'm going to be honest, after watching the first half, I thought, like, this probably shouldn't even be on the top five. But the second half was outstanding, but in the first half it was very strange. Dean Rock was missing frees, there was uncharacteristic errors, there was overhit passes, both teams were making silly errors, and, you know, Owen O'Gara kicked Dublin's first point after 15 minutes. Now, they did have that early goal from Conor O'Callaghan in the first minute, but Dublin just really couldn't settle into the game, and Mayo were the better team in the first half. Andy Moran was kicking a couple of points, he was looking quite bright, Colin Boyle was doing a great job at getting forward, and Dublin just couldn't really settle into the game at all. And they did lead by a point at half time, as Dublin kicked just 2 points from play in the first half, which was quite surprising. And of course in the second half, this is really where things really spiced up and got relentless. Dublin were outstanding in the second half without doubt, and they really took the game by the scruff of the neck. They got back into the game, they brought on Kevin McManaman. You know, another common team is bringing on Kevin McManaman, and he was definitely very, very impressive indeed in the second half. Mayo did have their opportunities. Cluxton made a big save on the 43rd minute when it looked like maybe if that had gone in, you know, who knows, maybe Mayo would have went on to win. And the final 20 minutes was relentless. Like, both teams were going back and forth, kicking over points. Dermot Connolly was kicking bright points. You had that Lee Keegan goal on the 53rd minute, which was absolutely outstanding. You know, Rock hit a point, and Cillian O'Connor would come back and hit an absolute beauty. It was literally neck and neck between the two, and they were literally both going all at it here. And without doubt, the final 20 to 25 minutes was probably, you know, this would have been number one on the list if we had seen this throughout the entire game. And I think in the first half, both teams were nervous. They weren't really playing to the best of their ability. But in the second half, they both just absolutely went for it. And it could have went either way. It really, really could have. Obviously, Cillian O'Connor had that late opportunity from a free where he hit the post. And, you know, you're talking absolutely, you know, millimetres in it. If Mayo had scored that, who knows? Maybe they would have won the All-Ireland, and maybe they would have hung on and won the game. Of course, obviously, you know, Dublin go down the other end after a couple of minutes. Chris Barrett with a foul, and Dean Rock was able to dispatch it over. You know, you could even arguably say it probably wasn't a foul. You know, it was definitely a contentious one. But Dean Rock got the opportunity, slotted it over, and Dublin, of course, were victorious and ran out 117 to 116 winners. And at number one, we have the 2015 replay between Dublin and Mayo. This time around, we had the replay, and this was an absolute exhibition of stuff. This was an absolute beauty of a game, a brilliant game of football from both teams. It was intense, it was feisty, and it was relentless stuff from start to finish, and deservedly so, in my opinion, makes number one. But like, running through some of the kind of big talking points in that game, like, as I said before, it was intense, it was feisty. Both teams were in each other's faces from early on. And obviously, following on from, we talked a bit about the drawn game earlier on. So Mayo had Dublin on the ropes at the end of the first half, or the end of the second half. Dublin, you know, should have really been beaten. And Mayo really carried that momentum into this game. They were very confident early on. And unlike that game, Dublin and Mayo, where Dublin actually started the better in the 2015 drawn game, this time around Mayo started the better, and they really, really kicked on and kind of started this game the way they ended the first game. And Dublin were quite slow out of blocks, and Cillian O'Connor and Dermot O'Connor were causing Dublin a lot of problems. I actually do think that this was Cillian O'Connor's best performance against Dublin, in my opinion. I thought he was absolutely outstanding in this game. Paddy Andrews was probably Dublin's shining light in the first half, but Kieran Kilkenny really started to come alive in this game as well with some brilliant points. And Dublin actually didn't take the lead until the 31st minute, so it was Mayo who were leading early on, and when Dublin would respond, Mayo would go down the other end and score. But I think I read as well that both teams were level 9 times in this game, which shows how close it well and truly was. It was 10-10 at half time. Both teams were level. And the second half was interesting because Shamey O'Shea, who dragged Johnny Cooper to the ground, actually received a black card. And at the time I was thinking, bit harsh for a black card, could have potentially been a yellow, but the referee went with the black card. Andy Moran came on and made a massive difference, as he always does. Drove straight through the Dublin defence, played it on to Cillian O'Connor. He jinked it around Cluxton and put it in the back of the net, and Mayo were actually up by 4. And I remember watching this game at the time and thinking, there's no way we come back from this. There's no way Dublin are coming back from this, because obviously, in the drawn game, it looked like we should have been beaten, in the closing stages of that game. And in this game, we were now down by 4. We weren't playing, we were misplacing passes. We were rattled. We were absolutely rattled, and it didn't look like we were going to turn it around. But like with a lot of the great Dublin teams, they have the options on the bench. And Kevin McManaman came on, Alan Brogan came on, and both of them made a significant difference. And in particular, Kevin McManaman, I mean, he is the man, the myth, the legend when it comes to Dublin bringing on players to save the day. I don't know how many times Kevin McManaman has come on to save the day, and this was another day where he came on. Straight away he set up a point for James McCarthy, who slotted one over, and Dublin were back into it. Dublin were certainly back into the game. Fenton actually ran through on goal and actually mishit the shot in front of goal, but it actually fell to Bernard Brogan, who turned it into the back of the net. Dublin kicked on. As I said before, the game was there to be won for either side. Mayo had the 4-point lead. They could have kicked on. They could have won this game, but they allowed Dublin back into it. Dublin's bench made a massive difference, and in the end, Dublin were the side who ran out the winners. McManaman got another goal, of course, but that was after McMahon, who collided with Henley in the box. So that arguably could have been disallowed at the time. It could have been disallowed. It did look like Henley kind of more fell into the goal, which is kind of why I think that was given. But I think you could have arguably went either way with that one. But McManaman, classic goal, and Dublin were 7 points up then in the closing stages, and from there Dublin were always going to come out comfortable winners. And I think there was just great football from both teams on the day. Mayo were brilliant on the day with the likes of Cillian O'Connor and Lee Keegan, and obviously Dublin with the likes of Philly McMahon and the likes of James McCarthy kicking a couple of points, Kevin McManaman, Alan Brogan coming off the bench. And yeah, it was just a relentless stuff. I think the final score in the end was something like 3-15 to 1-14. It was outstanding stuff from both teams on the day, and yeah, that makes number 1 in my opinion, and that is my top 5 personally. I would be curious to hear, what some of you lads think in the comments down below. But personally, yeah, that would be number 1 on my list. I know there's a couple of games many people will probably think of. You might look at the 2016 replay, but for me, I thought both teams were quite poor that day. And I think in 2013, again, both teams were quite poor. I think Dublin had 1-2 at half time, which was very, very surprising in that game. And even in the 2016 game as well, Dublin really, and Mayo as well, both really weren't at the races at all until the final few minutes. It was kind of a common theme where the semi-finals, maybe because the pressure wasn't there, maybe because the nerves weren't there, both teams would play a lot better, whereas in the All-Ireland finals, both teams would actually be quite poor. Let's hope it's not the case this weekend. Obviously this weekend there won't be fans there, so maybe that will actually make a difference in that kind of regards, and both teams have actually been very high scoring going into the game as well. But yeah, look, listen, that's my top 5 obviously between Dublin and Mayo. Do let me know down in the comments below which was your best game you think, in your opinion, between Dublin and Mayo. There have certainly been some classic games down the years. There have been some bizarre moments, own goals, red cards. There's been absolutely everything, but in my opinion, number 1, Dublin and Mayo in the 2015 replay. Dublin 3-15, Mayo 1-14. An outstanding game, and that's number 1 on my list. So do let me know down in the comments below what was yours. Leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.